Okay, good morning. I only have one slide for you, so talking about the complexities and challenges. But before that, maybe just have a sense of the room. How many of you actually work in like IT security, cybersecurity? Nobody? Oh, couple. Oh, yeah, couple. Thank you. SME owners. Great, thank you. Thank you for being here. I just met somebody from a bakery, and it's really interesting. I think we need to blow that up a little bit. Yeah. And how many of you are hackers? No? Nobody. How many of you want to raise your hands no matter what I ask you? One of you. So I thought I'd just start off talking about the complexity and challenges in the work that you do. I think for the fact that things are so dynamic, so complex, it's great. For those of you working in cybersecurity, there's lots of job security. Three things come to mind, and because it's so complex, half the time I don't know what's going on. I don't know about you, but half the time I don't know what's going on, and therefore I may not know what I'm talking about. But three things come to mind. First of all, it's complex. In one of my last roles, I was coordinating globally with Interpol on behalf of Visa. And I was quite lucky. I always told the president of Interpol, I said, I'm very lucky because you're Singaporean, you brought Interpol's cybercrime or cyber reporting center to Singapore, and because of that, my company is based in US. The guys in US don't know what's going on, so they'll come to me and say, Nick, and all that, and I end up having a global coordination role. So we're really lucky to be here in Singapore. And one of the things that I found out from that role is that usually in any cyber attacks or any activities, a lot of it is cross-border. And when that happens, it becomes really difficult to do, and for sort of reporting, enforcement, and all that, and you have to coordinate with law enforcement from different jurisdictions, and not everybody might be as excited to cooperate with you. And after a while, you just kind of like, is it worth trying? Is it worth trying to do anything about it? And we have folks coming to me all the time say, hey, this happened, I want to report it, I want to do something. After a while, I'm like, I'm not sure. Oh, this country? Yeah, forget it, don't even bother. One interesting example we had was a success story though, it was Australian multinational being hacked. And we traced the source to Cambodia. And when we finally arrested the guy, we put him behind bars for 20 over years. That was interesting, given that it was Cambodia. We were surprised when we finally heard that outcome was 20 over years, because when they raided his house, they found drugs, they found everything else. So it was not just because it was cybercrime or criminal activity online. I think that's one challenge. The next one, who decides? I think I can probably go an hour just about this. Especially for those of you who work in cybersecurity or IT security. I think there's a whole conundrum between doing business and having like full-on security, and it's like the common refrain is that if you want to be so secure, the best way to be fully secure is don't do business. You're fully secure, but that's not how the world works, right? Obviously, that's not how for those of you in IT security, you'll probably end up losing your jobs. But the problem is that business is so dynamic. It's so dynamic, and therefore your challenges in keeping up in terms of security is always there, which is great for job security again. But who decides on what to do, how to respond? When let's say, I'm talking about response and governance. So when you've been attacked and all that, so who decides what to do? Do you, as the IT security guy, the CISO, the CISO, or the business owners, right? And I think there's always that tension between the guys who are running the business and the guys who's kind of like running the operations, the security operations, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Typically, I think when there's been an incident, if you manage to detect in the first place, okay? In the first place, I think when something happens, I think there's a lot of questions being asked. So what happened? What did we lose? What is down and all that, right? And I think commonly what I see is that the priority is let's get back to BAU as soon as possible. find out what happened, and then give me a report, and then let's say we'll talk about it later, right? That, I mean, for those of you who work in IT security, is that common? I see that quite a fair bit. And I think the problem with that is that yes, okay, the business wants to get back to BAU as soon as possible, but if you are not careful, then you may have, just by something is down, and then you restore it, you might have tampered with evidence. Right, you might have, and then if subsequently you want to do reporting, or things go to maybe go to the courts and all that, then things can be a bit more challenging. So these are some of the complexities or the challenges I just wanted to call out. I wear a hat for, I sit on the Council for the National Crime Prevention Council, so I do want to talk a little bit about reporting and enforcement, although I don't think we can go into too much depth. I think CSA has given a great presentation, Mr. Yam, and two things, right? So I just had to first of all qualify that you should, in Singapore, you should always report. You're always encouraged to report criminal activities that you see. That's the kind of at least a guideline. What I'm just calling out is that there are reporting channels, and even though, as I mentioned, it can be challenging, there's cross-border jurisdictions and all that, but you can report. There are avenues for you to report. It's so convenient now. You can go online to this URL, and then they can even give you categories of what you want to report. In the NCPC, I think it was Mr. Yam who mentioned about, we have this thing called Crime Watch, so thanks for talking about that, and we kind of raise public awareness about more consumer type, personal type related scams, and like these days, I mean, besides your e-commerce scams, we talk about things like your love scams. You're seeing a lot of people in Interpol at the time, they were handling some cases about sextortion, and usually the challenge is there's a lot of under-reporting. You can imagine why. I mean, I was just talking to the Interpol guys, and they're saying that, well, sextortion, I mean, a lot of people, when they're victims, they don't want to report, and there's lots of cases, right? So Scam Alert is a hotline. It's not a reporting channel. I just put it there anyway. You can call up. For those of you who kind of like, you think you've been scammed, you are not sure, you've just been approached for something you're not sure, you can call up and ask for advice. And then there's a website called scamalert.sg that you can actually go on to the website and share your stories. I just checked with the Secretariat, and it's like we have almost 1,000 stories being shared shared with us on the website. So that's on the reporting front. Okay, you can help me shift down. So focus on governance. I know quite a Alex, Stanley, and Mr. Yam has shared quite a fair bit this morning. I just want to highlight, emphasize on three things. And Mr. Yam has emphasized about the importance of risk assessment, risk management. Perhaps if I can just kind of like expand a little bit about it. I think it's important for you to have a strong risk management framework, whatever that you choose to use. Risk assessment, as to know exactly what kind of risk you're facing, what kind of threats you're facing. And then coming to mitigating it, right, there's a few ways, and I want to just talk about a few things. Mr. Yam again mentioned about a couple of things, but I think you talk about, first of all, risk transference. So if you talk about transferring to third party or insurance, and that's just one aspect. Another one is risk acceptance. So if you say that, hey, we either couldn't do anything, we think we can't do anything about it, which is unlikely the case. It's more so that we don't have the budget to deal with it. How many of you heard that before? This is okay, but we don't have the, yeah, it's it's good, but budget is limited. You see that. So then, for those of you who know some of these standards and frameworks like your 27001 ISO, just get your management to say that, well, if you think that you don't want to spend and there's a risk, we do a risk assessment, we accept the risk. And the last one is really about risk reduction. Risk reduction, right? And risk reduction happens a few ways. You spend money, you secure, whether it's physical, it's virtual, online. But in one of the organizations I worked with, risk reduction, we do what we call devaluing the data. We devalue the data that may come under threat. So, for example, for example, in payments business, how many of you are in finance payments industry? Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so if you are in like, for example, payments or finance, if you didn't store as much information full without encryption, then, or even like for credit card information, you normally, like, you mask you only show the first 6, last 4 digits, and you mask what's in between, then you've devalued the data, for example. So even if you are hacked and the data is gone, or you get, if you got attacked by ransomware and all that, then you've actually reduced your risk. I can't emphasize enough on the importance of monitoring, and I guess I shouldn't go into the details of that, but in the earlier example I mentioned about, hey, if you got, your systems went down, you got a breach, system went down, the first thing you want to go back to BAU, and then by going to BAU, sometimes you may have tampered evidence and stuff like that. But if you have a strong, robust monitoring and logging system, SIEMs or whatever, then at least, even as you restore, at least you're able to then have a strong audit trail that maybe just an example here, since I think I still got a bit of time, okay? Just an example here. I came across a company, they were really, really good. They spent millions of dollars doing CCTV surveillance. So I'm not talking about now, okay, I'm in monitoring and logging, you have your logs and all that, but you also, in some cases, there's CCTV surveillance. It's millions of dollars. Like, I went to their security control room, there were like, I think at least 200 cameras. And then 200 screens and all that, and said that we have backup, we store these images in 24 frames per second, and we keep the records for 3 years. I'm like, that's crazy. How much is your data storage? And it's like, oh, I think it's like how many TBs, and we spent $500,000 on our data storage just for the CCTV system. I was like, okay, it's very good. So then I asked them a question. I was like, so how many people monitoring? Oh, we have two guys always on staff. And I said, so I asked the security guys looking at the camera, so what do you look out for? There's 200 screens. What do you look out for? How do you monitor? And they're like, well, they couldn't answer me, right? And I think it's important that even as you have all that monitoring and all that logging, that you have a way to make sense of the data easily and quickly. AI, whatever, deep data analytics and all that, you have to be able to have I think, for example, in the case of video monitoring, surveillance and all that, there are now advanced video analytics, for example, that you can use, right, to say that, oh, this item is not supposed to be there, this person is not supposed to be here, and stuff like that. You can do all that. Otherwise, all the money that they spent could have been better spent. And maybe the last one. The last one is incidents response and recovery policies. I think for this one, I just want to call out 1 or 2 things. For those of you in specific industries, you have maybe certain regulations of how you should report, who should report, especially if you're in tier 1. Like I used to consult for a couple of, in the energy sector, a couple of power plants, and when you face an incident, you have to straight away put out a form, you have to report directly. I think it was the National Cyber Incident Response Framework and all that, you did the reporting. I think the challenge I found was that most times, a lot of organizations, they spend a lot of time, they spend a lot of money on disaster recovery, business continuity, and when it comes to incident response, it's always like, oh, there's the template and the form given by our consultant, or the government says we've got to fill up this form. And no real clear thinking about, so what happens when an incident happens, whether it's a big one, it's a defacement, ransomware, or whatever, or systems are down, before you start to activate business disaster recovery or anything. So who should be involved to respond to the incident? Is it just like your CEO? Many organizations may not have luxury to have a CISO in a sense. Then who should be the guys on the table to really kind of think about and decide how to respond? And the problem is that when incidents happen, you're usually in panic mode. You're like, oh, okay, like, oh, something happened, our website is down, our systems are down, and people are in panic mode, and then you just make decisions. But it's important that before things happen, as management, or in information security managers or whatever that there's some proper thinking from the management. If this happens, if that happens, or what kind of level of incidents happen, who should be involved, what kind of responses we should make before you activate your DR, your BCP is important. I'll just, I know we have a panel session after this, so we can talk a little bit more. But I just want to end with one last story. It was a few years back, I was helping or consulting for a company. It was before that. Do we have any Japanese in the room today? No Japanese? Okay. It's okay, we are Japanese, all right. But this is relating to a Japanese incident. So it was a Japanese company, multinational, related to the security business, operating in Shanghai. So the IT security manager was sitting down to me and relating something. She's relating an incident, and I will not go into the details. But I said this happened. It wasn't a really big deal, but it was a junior Japanese manager who was involved in this, right? And this is a local Shanghainese manager relating this to me about, he works for a Japanese company, and talk about this junior Japanese manager was involved in this incident. And the company lost some money, not a lot, lost some money. He said a few days later, this Japanese manager, junior manager, jumped over the building and committed suicide. So he said that he went to the funeral. He went to the funeral, and he was shocked that this Japanese colleague who committed suicide, he left behind his wife and 2 young kids. They were like less than 5 years old. So he was really shocked. It's like, he was saying that how irresponsible. You don't have to do this. In China, we don't do this, and all that. And as he was relating this to me, next to listening to the conversation was another junior Japanese manager. And he was like, he was listening to this, and they were talking, and he was like, if you allow me to share my perspective, I said, we can also say that this Japanese manager was very responsible. I'll leave that to you to reflect and digest and think about that. I wouldn't offer my comments on that. The moral of the story is not for you to jump over any buildings. I think I think sometimes what we're dealing with, the stakes can be a little bit high, and I think it's important to have strong governance. You have strong processes in place. I think a lot have been shared this morning, whether you use systems like Darktrace or solutions that M1 is offering, or all the tips that Mr. Yam was sharing. I think if you're proactive and you get the right management on board early and all that, then you don't have to feel that it's just you alone as the IT security manager versus the rest of the world and all that. So I think I'll end here. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.